Meemaw sat in front of a judge with roughly 80,000 undeclared cigarettes, a 17-year-old boy beside her, and somehow tried to call the whole thing a misunderstanding. But the cigarettes aren't the disturbing part. The disturbing part is that Georgie didn't think he was committing a crime. He thought he was becoming a father. That changes the entire story. In Season 6, Episode 1, the judge looks at Meemaw and Georgie and lays out exactly what customs found. 400 cartons. A standard carton holds around 200 cigarettes. Do the math. That's approximately 80,000 cigarettes packed into one spectacularly stupid family business trip. Then Georgie asks whether that amount is over the limit. The judge answers, by $3.99. That line gets a laugh because Georgie sounds clueless. But stop laughing for 1 second. This isn't an adult businessman pretending not to understand import laws. This is a scared teenager whose pregnant girlfriend wants almost nothing to do with him, whose parents are losing their jobs, and who believes money is the only thing standing between him and becoming a complete failure. And the adult sitting beside him helped load the car. But to understand why Meemaw went along with this, you have to go backward. Season 5, Episode 22. Georgie is working inside Meemaw's illegal gambling room. He needs more money because Mandy is pregnant. First, he tries selling beer without a license. Meemaw catches him. She doesn't laugh, she doesn't encourage him. She warns him that selling illegal alcohol could get everyone arrested. She literally tells him, "You're gonna get us all arrested." Remember that. Because minutes later, Georgie suggests selling cigarettes instead. Customers won't have to leave the gambling room. They can buy cigarettes inside. Meemaw likes the business idea. Georgie suggests buying cartons locally and marking up the price. Then Meemaw makes one tiny comment that detonates the entire situation. She tells Georgie that when she was younger, people crossed into Mexico to buy cigarettes cheaply. That's it. That's the seed. Georgie immediately wants to do it. Meemaw refuses. She tells him she isn't driving to Mexico. She even insults him for thinking he can handle the trip alone. So Meemaw tried to stop him, right? Not exactly. Because Georgie keeps pushing. He recruits Wade, a customer who supposedly knows a little Spanish. Meemaw tests Wade's Spanish, realizes he understands almost nothing, then warns Georgie that he could get himself killed. Georgie gives her the one sentence she cannot ignore. "I got no choice. I got a kid coming." And Meemaw folds. She announces that if Georgie is determined to go to Mexico, she is going with him. That sounds protective. It almost is. But adults don't get to join a teenager's criminal plan and call themselves supervision. This is where a concept called normalization of deviance changes how you see Meemaw. Normalization of deviance is what happens when someone breaks rules repeatedly without suffering a disaster, until dangerous behavior starts feeling ordinary. Meemaw runs an illegal gambling room. She pays off police officers. She has been arrested before. She remembers smuggling cheap cigarettes when she was younger. Nothing destroyed her life. So to Meemaw, crossing the border with undeclared cigarettes isn't a major criminal operation. It's another hustle, another funny story, another rule meant for somebody less clever. But Georgie is watching her. And that's the part nobody talks about. Strip away the comedy framing from their drive to Mexico. Georgie sits in the vehicle thinking about how quickly his life collapsed. 1 year earlier, he had almost no responsibility. Now Mandy is pregnant, his family is humiliated at church, and he has no idea how he is going to pay for a baby. Meemaw starts singing along to Ring of Fire. Georgie asks how she can sing while his life is falling apart. The moment plays like classic Meemaw. Wild, unbothered, funny. But watch Georgie's face. He isn't on an adventure. He's panicking. The adult driving him toward an international border is treating his terror like something he'll eventually laugh about. That is normalization of deviance happening inside a family. Georgie sees Meemaw stay calm, so the danger must not be real. He sees her joke, so the consequences must be manageable. He sees her take control, so maybe this is what responsible adults do when their families need money. Subscribe because this family buried some of its darkest lessons inside its funniest scenes, and we're opening every one of them. Then Customs catches them. Season 6 opens with Georgie and Meemaw being held at the border. Georgie notices an open window and considers escaping. Meemaw shuts him down. Finally, she becomes the responsible adult. Except it's already too late. They are brought before Judge Landry. Meemaw denies that they were smuggling. She tries to bargain the $2,500 fine down as though she is negotiating at a yard sale. When the judge gives them the choice between an expensive trial they will lose or pleading guilty and paying, Georgie still asks the question that exposes how badly he understands the situation. "But we get the cigarettes back, right?" "No, Georgie. You don't get the contraband back. You don't get the money back. You don't get the night back." And George now has to drive 8 hours to rescue his 17-year-old son from a border jail. But here's where the story turns. Because Georgie isn't the villain of this episode. He's the most tragic person in it. Inside the holding area, Georgie says the arrest will make a cool story for his child someday. He jokes about naming a son Winston after the cigarette brand, or naming a daughter Virginia after Virginia Slims. Meemaw physically moves away from him. Funny, right? Now remove the joke. A frightened teenage boy is sitting in jail, trying to turn humiliation into a future story, because the alternative is admitting he may already be failing a child who hasn't been born. That's what Georgie always does. He sells confidence when he's terrified. He sells jokes when he's ashamed. He sells anything he can because selling is the only talent his family consistently admits he has. Then George arrives. Georgie promises to repay every penny. He insists he did this for the baby. He even suggests that his motive might give George a reason to feel proud. George just looks at him. But later, during the drive home, the comedy drops away. Georgie asks whether George was scared when Mary became pregnant with him. George says he was terrified. Georgie finally admits that he is scared too. He doesn't know what he is doing. He doesn't know what anyone expects from him. He points out that George and Mary were at least married and facing parenthood together. George admits Georgie has it harder. That is the real ending of the cigarette story. Not the jail. Not the fine. Not Meemaw bargaining with the judge. A father finally looking at his reckless son and recognizing himself. And that becomes brutal when you jump forward to The Big Bang Theory. Season 11, Episode 23. Adult Sheldon remembers Georgie as the stupid brother who bullied him. But adult Georgie remembers something else. He remembers what happened after George died. Mary fell apart. Missy was still a teenager. Sheldon left Texas. Georgie stayed and handled the family. Then Georgie tells Sheldon, "You're my baby brother." He explains that Sheldon's difficult life didn't mean life was easy for everyone else. That successful adult businessman began here, in a border jail, desperate to provide, terrified of failing, using the worst possible method because the adult he trusted had spent years teaching him that rules were negotiable when family needed something. That's the final twist. Meemaw didn't drag an innocent Georgie into crime. Georgie created the scheme. But Meemaw gave his desperation permission. She turned a frightened teenager's reckless idea into a road trip. She showed him that danger could be joked away, police could be paid, judges could be negotiated with, and consequences could become stories. Normalization of deviance doesn't begin with one enormous crime. It begins with 100 smaller moments where nothing terrible happens. Until somebody loads 400 cartons into a vehicle and genuinely believes everything will probably be fine. Georgie eventually becomes responsible, successful, and fiercely loyal to his family. But he doesn't become that man because this scheme worked. He becomes that man because it failed badly enough to force him to look his father in the eye and finally say the truth. He was scared. Tell me whether you think Meemaw protected Georgie or trained him, because the border didn't teach Georgie to break rules. His family taught him that when love